Hey there! Welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2017 crime drama with some thriller elements and some bits of fisticuffs and fights. Brawl in Cell Block 99. Now, before I get around to sharing my thoughts on the rest of this film, I want to give a shout out to Lawrence for requesting this review. And if there is a film, a TV show, or a topic, or an anime, or something along those lines that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, Brawl in Cell Block 99 is a film that's written and directed by S. Craig Zahler. And this is a guy who prior to this did a film called Bone Tomahawk, which I've heard about but I haven't seen yet because the running time seems a little daunting, and I've also heard some things about the plot that really don't rub me the right way, so to speak. So I haven't really got around to checking that one out. This is a film that I do remember hearing a lot about when it was released. I remember critics being really big fans of it. I remember people talking about it just solely for Vince Vaughn's performance and how different it is from the norm when it comes to the kind of roles that he normally does. And I gotta be honest, at the end of the day, I did like this film, mainly for Vince Vaughn's powerhouse performance and for the film's really hardcore, gritty violence and some other aspects of it, like the direction and some other technical merits. But I didn't love it because I feel that this film is stretched out and it's drawn out too much in terms of the dialogue, in terms of the plot, and in terms of a lot of extraneous scenes that did not need to be nearly as long as they were in the finished product. Now, S. Craig Zahler, from what I've seen, he's a talented filmmaker. This is a guy who definitely knows how to create some vivid visuals. He knows how to really uh, provide some intriguing atmosphere and mood to his films. When it comes to the sequences where Vince Vaughn's character, uh, Bradley, was getting into these brawls in the prisons, the way that he shot it was really excellent because it was not shot in a way where it was full of shaky cam or quick cuts or zooms or any of that bullshit. It was shot with a wide take or uh, with a mix of other shots in between to really add to the realism of these fights, despite how over the top a lot of the violence is. And I definitely feel that this is a director who absolutely 100% has potential, and that's what makes this film a little frustrating at times because the direction is very competent, very skilled, but the writing is not really on par with the direction. This happens so much nowadays with these independent filmmakers who think that they are God's gift to cinema and they feel that they are equally as adept writers as they are directors. And a good chunk of the time, at least to me personally, that's usually not the case. And I feel with Brawl and Cell Block 99, the direction is really good. Although at times I feel that he lingers on certain shots for way too long. I mean, shots of Vince Vaughn's character just driving a boat. Okay, alright. I know what you're trying to do here. Add some realism, but it's repetitive and it feels like it's extraneous and unnecessary. So there's a fair amount of those kind of scenes where things are drawn out too much from the directing standpoint. But there's not as many of those scenes to me as what goes on with the film's plot, with the film's narrative. This is a movie that, when you break it down, is really cut and dry. It's about this former boxer named Bradley Thomas who has, in the past, worked as a drug runner. He, at the point in the film where we are introduced to his character, he is on the straight and narrow. He is working as a mechanic, and then you find out that he loses his job as a mechanic, and that spurs him to go back to a life of crime. So it goes back to being a drug runner because he wants to provide a better life for his wife and hopefully a potential kid. And that's all good and well, but this is called Brawl in Cell Block 99, and you don't really get a sequence that takes place in a prison until 45 minutes into the movie. And at that point, it's not even really the prison that features Cell Block 99. It's some minimum security prison. And if that isn't slow enough in terms of how things are unfolding, Bradley doesn't even get to Cell Block 99 until an hour and 20 minutes into the film, or an hour and a half. And prior to that, he doesn't even get into any kind of brawls, unless you want to count the brawl he has with the parked car. But if you're not counting that, he doesn't get into a brawl until like an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. And this is a 2-hour long film. To put things into perspective, this would be as if in Escape from New York, which I think is like an hour and a half or around there, if in that movie Snake Plissken does not get to New York until an hour into the film, you'd be like, why the fuck did you take so long? And see, that's the thing. Once this movie gets to prison, once this movie stops having really drawn out, pretty pretentious sequences where Vince Vaughn is talking about skim milk, or I think it wasn't skim milk, it was skim creamer versus fat creamer, and how he goes to the store and he doesn't want to look at the labels, so he takes a chance, and most of the time he doesn't get what he wants. I get what the filmmaker's trying to go for with that, but we don't need to stop the film to a grinding halt to have these really weird tonal shifts where the film's trying to be philosophical and has dialogue that makes no sense in the overall scope of this narrative or the story or the kind of characters that we're introduced to. And this drawn out nature of this narrative and of this screenplay, it makes the film a little tedious at times. But like I said, once it gets going, once he gets to the prison, Redleaf, and really starts kicking ass and taking names, it's a really good film. See, that's the thing. I wish that the movie was shorter. I wish that there were more scenes in Redleaf. I wish there was more with that, because the build-up is nowhere near as interesting. It just isn't to me. He goes back to being a drug runner. There are these guys who decide to tag along that he doesn't trust. You find out that he's right on the money, they're not trustworthy, and they try to fuck everything up. The police then come in, and Vince Vaughn's character actually does the right thing and saves these police officers and takes out these dumbass uh, hangers on when it comes to the operation. And for all his troubles, he gets sent to prison. And to make matters worse, he is sentenced to prison for longer than what he was initially told. So now he's sentenced to prison for 7 years, and his wife is pregnant, and that means he's never going to see the birth of his child. And if that doesn't suck enough, then he gets blackmailed because the same group that was responsible for the whole deal going bad now wants revenge on him. So they hire some contractors to kidnap his wife and keep her hostage and threaten to give her an abortion, or have this abortionist come in and do an operation on her baby where he would cut its limbs off and it could be born without limbs, which was really fucked up, but I honestly thought was darkly brilliant, because it's the kind of fucked up shit that I honestly had never seen before or heard of. So I gotta give the film kudos for that. So there's this whole thing with the pregnant wife, and in order to prevent this horrible fate from happening to his unborn child, he's asked to try to go after and find this guy who's in Red Leaf and kill him. And that's really the main gist of the plot. Does this sound like something that needs to be 2 hours? No, it does not. It's this drawn out nature of this narrative just does this story and Vince Vaughn and pretty much everyone else involved in this production from an acting standpoint a disservice, because it makes their efforts feel nowhere near as impactful, because of the fact that there's a good chunk of the movie where it's just kind of there. You're not really as invested in it as you are in other portions of the film. So it's very inconsistent when it comes to the investment. Now, like I was saying earlier, once it gets to Red Leaf with Don Johnson as the warden, I really like it. It's dark, it's got a nice comic nature to it at times, and it's brutal, and the violence is just some of the most gritty and brutal and bloody violence that you will ever see in this kind of movie. There's a curb stomp that is a real jaw dropper in more ways than one. There are the fights, which they aren't choreographed in a way where Vince Vaughn is doing like a ton of over the top or unique fight moves, but it's a brawl. So it being slow and methodical works really well. And he just comes across as this unstoppable Jason Voorhees like force of nature, where he's just beating the fuck out of everybody. And he's also a character that you root for, because the screenplay does a good job making him sympathetic, despite the fact that he is a criminal and he does have a fair amount of flaws in terms of his character. And there are other things about it too that I think really do work in terms of the narrative. The whole setup. The setup of this risk that he has to take, which he knows if he takes this risk and he manages to succeed, he's absolutely fucked. He's screwed with no lube, because he's never going to get out of prison. Or even worse, he's going to die. But he comes to peace with that. And there's a really great scene where Vince Vaughn, his character Bradley, calls his wife and pretty much tells her that he loves her and that he misses her and asks if he can speak to his unborn kid. And it's a really poignant and heart-wrenching moment in a film that just has a lot of super violent, gory, bloody brawls. And ultimately, he does what he's asked to do. Well, actually, no, he does what he's asked to do, but then he finds out that the person he's supposed to kill isn't even there, and really it's just a setup, and he catches on in time enough for him to turn the tables and really kick some ass. And the fights, when they are there, they're well shot, they're well done, they have a lot of impact and oomph to them. And when it comes to the ending, I know some people have an issue with it, but I think a violent end to a violent man is rather fitting. I think it works. It doesn't bother me because I knew he was going to die anyway, and the fact that he dies still curb stomping a guy so hard that he decapitates his ass, he still gets his revenge. He still finds a way to save his wife and his unborn kid. To me, it really didn't matter how he died. And him dying in such a way that was equally as violent as the ways that he killed other people, I thought was rather poetic. And was one hell of a way to end a movie. I mean, it definitely leaves a mark. I mean, that was a really intense shotgun blast to the face. Although I don't think it was a shotgun, it was just a regular pistol. But the way that it was shot was just really intense. And yeah, at the end of the day, I do like the film, but I don't love it because it takes too long to get going, and you got these scenes that either go nowhere or take too long to get anywhere. I mean, you got a whole sequence where there's this guy who's just an asshole at the minimum security, or actually it's a maximum security prison. He's just a massive prick who, well, actually no, it's a minimum security prison. It's not the, because the whole thing that goes on with Red Leaf is they don't even have the normal procedures. So at the minimum security prison, there's this asshole who, just because Bradley didn't close the door on the collections box for his personal items quietly, he makes him go stand in line again and do it all over. And the guy never is really brought up again, so what was the point? And I am 100% in agreement with other critics that have pointed out the fact that there are other characters in this plot that serve the same purpose. So why have that guy there? It just adds unnecessary time to a movie that's already too long. But despite the inconsistent screenplay and the issues that I do have with the story, I ultimately do think that the film is worth watching, and the performances by this cast are really terrific. I mean, Vince Vaughn, this is honestly one of his best performances. Might be his best performance that I've seen, because he really goes against type here, and he plays a character that is legitimately intimidating and a force of nature, but at the same time, because of the fact that Vince Vaughn has this openness, he has this vulnerability, and he has this charisma, he makes this character, who in a lot of ways is this big burly thug, into someone that you genuinely learn to love throughout the course of the film. You have Jennifer Carpenter, who plays his wife. She plays the role well. she does what she's asked to do and does so effectively. Don Johnson plays a great bad guy as the warden of Redleaf, Warden Tuggs. Don Johnson, over the years recently, has reinvented himself. He was known for being the good guy, and nowadays he's getting a lot of bad guy roles, and he's excelling at them. So it's always a lot of fun to see him play these bad guy roles because he played a good guy for so long that he knew how to get the audience to really appreciate or to admire him as a personality. So now he's able to use that to his advantage to create some really memorable and enjoyable villains. Udo Kier, he plays the mysterious man working for Elazar, who's the contact who visits Bradley in jail and tells him the whole plan. And Udo Kier, he's fine. Plays that role to a hilt. Uh, you also have Mustafa Shakir, who plays Andre. You've got Thomas Guiry, who plays a young guard of Redleaf. Trying to look at the rest of the. You got Dion Mucciato, who plays Elzar, the one who comes to torment Bradley in prison, and he's the one that ultimately gets absolutely brutally beat up and just torn to shreds by Bradley by the end of the film. You also have trying to look at the cast here just to remember. So you've got the actor plays Gil. You've got Marc Blucas, who plays Bradley's boss. He's his boss who gives him the jobs for drug running. So mainly, though, most of the running time is dedicated to Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Carpenter, Don Johnson, Udo Kier, and Marc Blucas. And Dion Mucciato and a few other people, but mainly that's your main cast, and really solid cast. But it's Vince Vaughn's show. That's really the case here. He's the showstopper. There were a lot of other things that I thought were pretty good about this too, like the songs that they decided to use for the soundtrack. There was a lot of R&B and a lot of other stuff that actually fit the film pretty well, surprisingly. I felt the score by Jeff Harriott and apparently S. Craig Zahler. I didn't know he was also doing music. I thought that worked uh, quite well with the film. I thought it fit. It had a lot of 70s vibes to it. Felt the film was shot well in terms of the cinematography by Benji Bashki. Although there were some moments at times where it was a little too dull in terms of the color palette, but for the most part, it had some nice cinematography. And it was well edited by Greg Diaria. It's just there were moments that could have been trimmed down, but I'm not really blaming the editor. I'm blaming the director. I think this is his call. He's one of those directors that thinks that once he writes something and once he turns in the final cut, that's it. He doesn't have to do anything else. It's perfect the way it is. And that's normally not the case. And to me, it's definitely not the case with this film. What prevents this movie from being brilliant, what prevents this movie from being truly great, is the fact that it's just too slow. It's too slow to get going, to start throwing punches, and by the time it does, the movie's almost already over. But all of that being said, I still like the film. I'm still glad to have it in my collection, mainly for the bits of hardcore violence that, by the way, were also done practically. So you had a lot of practical effects and bones getting broken and heads getting smashed and people getting shot in the face, and it's all done practically with makeup effects, and it's not CGI. So that was a really big selling point for me. And like I said, once it gets to Red Leaf, it's a really good time. But that's like an hour and a half into the movie. I just wish most of the movie took place in Red Leaf. I don't really care about the extended backstory to him and the drug deal gone bad, or the bit in the minimum security prison. We don't even need the bit in the minimum security prison. Just have him go straight to Red Leaf. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Brawl in Cell Block 99. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.